Hello and welcome to the Watson Weekend. I'm your host, Rick Watson.
Hi, it's Jessica Liseski. We have made it a whole other week, and there is a lot going on, Rick, in
So
this world.
much.
So much. But you're in Cleveland.
Yes, believe land to
Believe
you
land,
mere
yes.
mortals.
Yes, all right. So, yes, this is your weekly dose of medicine, just enough sugar to make it go down a little bit easier. The Watson Weekend is here, where your place for go-to news in the world of retail, tech, and e-commerce. Rick, are we professionals?
We may never be professionals.
I think that would take the wind out of our sails.
I almost think that we should just accept our fate in life at this
Yeah, we
point.
should. We should. But we are able to bring this show to you, right? Through the goodness of our friends at Miracle. You want to tell our audience about it, Rick?
Yeah, the Watson Weekend is brought to you by Miracle. They have over 450 global customers in the engine of e-commerce growth. They're actually going to be at Shop Talk if you're going to be out there, which if you're not, then I'm going to give you FOMO, and Jess is going to reflect the FOMO.
I will. I'll be projecting what it feels like from the FOMO. I can't be there this year, so
Yeah.
I'm going to live vicariously through you, Rick. And
Yeah,
our e-commerce buzz friends.
exactly. Miracle's in booth 1746. So if you want to explore new revenue streams with both marketplaces and retail media to help you serve your customers better, join them.
Yeah, you
Stop
should.
by the booth 1746.
Yeah, it's feeling a little rough o'clock right now for retail. So I'm sure people could use some boost and encourage you to check out Miracle.
Correct.
So we do have a lot to unpack. We've got our headline hangover as usual. This is Rick's second love language, the cross-border commerce show. So we're really looking forward to unpacking that with you, Rick. We're going to go back to your glory days and
Yes.
talk about the times when global was so hot.
I know when it was so hot. We have a guest coming on to talk about it, so we'll talk about that soon. Matt Steinbrecher. In terms of if you're also just a reminder, we're a live show, so add your comments in. We will answer them. I think we'll answer them.
We try.
We might even show them on
Yeah.
the show to give you your 2 minutes of fame. So that's exciting too.
That's what we do it for. All the glory.
Exactly. So first story up in the headline hangover is Walmart playing checkers, China playing chess. So obviously, look, Walmart has had a lot of power for many decades, and they tend to play hardball with their suppliers. And so if suppliers' costs go up, Walmart says, not my problem. Well, China essentially says, not so fast. And the reason is, if you're going to increase costs of Chinese suppliers, to make sure that the American consumer is not going to pay anymore, and then China might have a little problem. So apparently some of the Walmart vice presidents were summoned to the principal's office in China to get read the riot act about Walmart's policies. We'll see how this plays out. Walmart has itself over 340 something stores in China between Walmart and Sam's Club, which are super popular and successful. So it'll be interesting to see who has the leverage. Can China live without Walmart? That's the question that Xi Jinping needs to answer.
Yeah, it is. It's a little bit of an as the world turns situation for sure. And I have this feeling, we talked about, Mark Zuckerberg will have a permanent parking spot at the government, and he did for a while anyways, maybe not some more since he's like turned a little bad boy and he's got a chain and he's hanging out.
He's got a chain.
But the reality is I do think we're going to have these vice presidents. Maybe it might not even be a parking spot. They might have an apartment like right there at all these different the folks in the government they've been summoned by and the suppliers. But ultimately, this is not a good situation for either party. But for sure, I think Walmart does not have the easy peasy of like handing over this is your problem.
That's right. And look, Walmart, they have a lot of American suppliers. It's not 100%. I think the number last I remember was somewhere in the 20 to 30% range.
That's
Chinese
right.
suppliers, and so it's not a problem for a big part of their business, and it may encourage Walmart to continue to diversify its supplier base away from China in the future to avoid problems like this. So we'll
100%.
see. We'll see what happens.
Yeah. Well, speaking of other retailers and things happening in China, if you had Shein on your bingo card, good job on you, because we are back to talk about our friends there. And they're getting scrappy, and I guess they're really trying to start taking more pages out of a merchandising playbook. Because if you've been to their site, it is like inventory threw up all over it. And there's no real rhyme or reason to it. I don't fully understand
The
it.
kids love it though, Jess.
Well, that's because most of the time people are just going to type in like Free People knockoffs or Lululemon knockoffs, and they're just getting these pages and pages of essentially the same type of product. But
Dupes.
I think dupes are hot right now. Talking about things that are hot. It's okay to look for less. That's a good thing. So we're going to show you now what they've announced is these like merchandised shops, and they're in these different trend themes. So it's there's these brands that they're spotlighting: Misguided, Someone, Moat.
What am I looking at here? Please, break this down for me.
You're looking at this is the next hot thing on Shein. You got to stay trendy. So what's really interesting is if you go to this page, and we could take this down now, but if you go to this page, it's like it takes a tough time for it to load. I think there's probably so much different imagery going on. It's like a 60-second page load time. You don't know what's in there. Forever 21 is featured, but they've got these different trends that they're offering. Really, it's supposed to help the consumer shop and find and discover. But I don't know that this is necessarily going to hit the mark. And how did this end up on a PR newswire? Unclear.
I mean, Forever 21 is there. I thought they were going bankrupt.
No, they're just going to be.
They're closing all their stores. I got it. Okay.
Yeah. Remember, it's all one big happy family.
It's like the Jamie Salter rehabilitation plan.
That's right. Exactly. Yeah. So bring us home in our last story here.
Yeah, our last story, we're learning that diamonds are not forever, especially because Kohl's swapped them out for beauty products with Sephora. Apparently, it doesn't seem to be helping Kohl's results in the end, where they bombed another Q4 in 2024. And it just seems like whatever the retailer does to get itself out. I mean, you kind of knew it a few years ago when they wanted to partner with Amazon for returns. And like, this is going to bring us to the promised land. Like
traffic. It's all about traffic, Rick.
Yeah, exactly. People coming into our store because it's way better than a UPS store, I guess. I don't know. Never understood the logic behind it.
It's a destination. It's an all-in-one, right?
Yeah. So bring the family. Get on the rides.
Boxes. We'll get a little beauty action. We'll use your Kohl's cash and get your outfits for the weekend. Yeah, I think that Kohl's is struggling, as many of these types of mid-tier department stores are. Macy's, it's for sure Macy's and Kohl's aren't necessarily in the same, but they might actually be blending more now. Macy's has been struggling, Kohl's has been struggling, and I also think Kohl's footprint and where their locations are have not necessarily sustained as destinations, right? They've been more in these like shopping centers that are not what the modern consumer is going to they're not usually in these mixed use type centers, right? They're in those typical strip malls. And I don't know that those are necessarily the same type of destination. So I think that works against them. Their inventory necessarily isn't as exciting, maybe as it once was back in the day when, The Hills was hot. You remember that show? And Lauren Conrad had a line there. Then I think J-Lo had a line there. I
must be big in Raleigh.
Yeah, it's here. I've just hooked you up with a new show, and you can thank me later. Okay.
Thank you.
So yeah, I just think that Kohl's has been on that downswing, and I don't know that they are able to rebuild. And I hate being negative like that. What's the differentiation that they're going to ultimately bring to the consumer that they can't get somewhere else? Look at Shein. I mean, the trends are there, my friend.
The trends are there, and that's where I want to end up. Forever 21. What's the irony in that name right now?
for life.
Right.
Yeah. Forever 21 for life.
Right.
So, yeah. So I guess are we on the Sears trajectory at this
Yeah, I
point?
mean, look, we're on the downslide, and I'm not sure it's a matter of a new investor taking them over. I think at this point, the real estate will be sold off for more than the value of the chain, except if they're able to liquidate it better than their peers, which doesn't seem to be the
Yeah.
case. So,
Yeah. Seems dicey.
yes.
Well, uh, again, I did not necessarily have Kohl's in the bankruptcy thing on the 2025. That'll be one to watch for sure. Some other brands are on that downswing, but there's always a bright spot. There's always opportunity, and we pivot and segue into what we're going to talk about with our cross border. Um, those could be opportunities for brands to expand, grow their reach, get new consumers. For sure, that was the strategy. It feels like for a decade at least, Rick, when we were in this like the thick of the commerce ecosystem. You had our friends at Guelph that were hosting these like very big conferences tied to these cross-border strategies.
That's right.
And so, yeah, it kind of helps set the scene of like, before we talk about our guest and bring him on, like, let's help kind of set the scene of what the cross border ecosystem was and where you kind of start to see it evolve.
Yeah, I mean, I think cross-border really came of age. Um, I think particularly in North America, it started with mostly like a group of Canadians trying to buy American merchandise like a little bit cheaper, just because, as our guest points out, over half of Canadians are within 50 miles of the U.S. border,
Yeah.
and so as a result, there's affinity for U.S. products. You saw a number of companies come up in the US market, in particular, folks like 51.com, which became border free. Uh, Bongo, which one got acquired by FedEx, and then iParcel was another one that got acquired by
Mhm.
UPS. These three were the ones that were battling it out. Border Free was one that made it to the public markets briefly to be
Yep.
acquired by Pitney Bowes.
Yep.
That's kind of where Rick Watson entered his sort of cross-border journey. Um, and so I spent 3 years heading up product management for cross border at Pitney Bowes there. And so this time was a time where, paradoxically, the US dollar was like at its weakest point in really like the previous 10 years, like 2015, 2016 timeframe. And so
Mhm.
what happens is when foreign consumers can buy US goods more cheaply, then cross-border trade, it booms, Jess. It booms.
So big.
So it's like a cycle. So I think when we look at cross-border in the last several years, particularly in the middle of COVID, it hasn't been everyone's biggest priority just because of the supply chain disruption. So
Right. Yeah, the supply chain disruption. You also have what you've talked about this age of efficiency. You and Nick Kaplan, where people needed to really shrink and hone in on what was driving 80% of the volume and not like the fringe. And so I think that also had an impact. But we are going to unpack so much with Matt Steinbrecher, who is the VP of Revenue at Reach. He's got nearly a decade of experience, and he's a thought leader in payments industry. He's focused on how to help merchants navigate all of these complexities in the global landscape. And ultimately, he's going to break down a lot of different things with us. He's talked about, first of all, there's all these different acronyms, right? It's almost, is it like a Greek language, Rick, when you enter cross border? I mean, did you have a playbook of like,
yeah,
hey,
you
these
have
are
to
all the acronyms I have to learn?
on your first day you get a decoder ring. It's same as the little Orphan Annie decoder ring
Yep.
in yeah.
Yep. Yeah, exactly. So because Matt is such this like global jet setter, if you will, he's not going to be here live with us today. We did shoot some segments with him earlier this week. We had to fit into his very busy schedule. So we're going to then hit it up, and I think we're going to first talk about what's merchant of record, right, Rick?
Yeah, this sort of acronym soup we're talking about.
Yeah, exactly.
With merchant of record, it's actually not a legally defined term anywhere in any legislation globally.
Oh.
So it's actually a term that's coined by Visa, who, if you have to play by their rules, because if you want to accept Visa credit cards on your website, you obviously have to, play by the rules there.
Pretty important.
Of course, but it's not, as it relates to tax authorities, collecting VAT or sales tax or duties.
Yeah.
It's not really a term that's known by actual legislators, like governing bodies. So what that means is it's basically up for interpretation. And a lot of people use it in different ways. So the most common way that it's used is like you're basically acting as a third party merchant of record. And ultimately, a merchant of record is just a merchant. Like they are just acting as a seller to a consumer, buying a product from some sort of supplier and then selling it back to that consumer. And that's ultimately what it really means at the end of the day.
Wow. You're going to have to break this down for me, Jess.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think first it's like I thought it was interesting. I didn't know this, and I feel like I'd been in the mix for a while. I didn't know that Visa had coined that term merchant of record. And I do think different people interpret it different ways, but it ultimately is like, who's got the accountability, right?
That's right.
If somebody's got to come after someone, who is that going to be?
And especially the credit card providers and the banks need to know who owns the risk.
Owns the risk. Yep. And, there were lots of other acronyms that we talked about, like DDP, harmonized codes, HCO. So what's the reason for all these acronyms, Rick? And like, does it turn people off?
Yeah. I mean, look, the reason for all these acronyms is essentially just a shorthand for doing business, which acts as a way to feel in the cool club. Jess.
Yeah, that's true.
That's really when you get down to it. That's what it's about.
Yeah. Well, one that I thought we didn't talk about or show the clip is DDP, because that one does matter as it relates to the customer experience. Do you want to unpack that one a little bit?
Yeah, DDP stands for duty deliveries paid, and essentially it means is when the consumer is checking out. Obviously online, there's always a online checkout, and so as you go through the checkout, what happens is you purchase the item. Well, it doesn't necessarily mean in all situations, especially in cross-border involved, is that your purchase is done. Because if the seller doesn't have all the duties built into the purchase price, then you could be asked to produce extra money when the item appears at your local post office or even when it appears on your doorstep. And so DDU, or duty delivery unpaid, essentially means that special surprise you're going to get in the form of being asked to pay for that purchase when it arrives to you. And duty delivery paid is a way to sort of sidestep that. Usually a lot of what happens is your express carriers like a FedEx or a UPS will allow shippers to collect those tariffs up front, and then you will make the process seem more seamless for the buyer.
Yeah.
Now, of course, your purchase price will be a little bit more, but hopefully that's a better experience than being surprised later on.
That's right. No, that is
shout out to Miles Thomas here.
That's
says extra money and fees, which we always love as part of our purchases.
We do, but it is the surprise and delight that no one wants. Is you ordered this product and congrats, you now pay us an extra $50 because you've got to get it off the hands of Royal Mail or Canada Post or wherever it's hanging out. So
yeah, no, for sure.
All right. So the next thing that Matt talked about that was really interesting is there's like these different ways of going to market. You have the shotgun approach, you have going deep, and we wanted to figure out, what does that really mean? How does he advise brands on the best strategy, and what does go deep ultimately represent if you're trying to fit that into your strategy, your go-to-market plans, also the investment that you need in order to make this successful? So let's talk about, let's show the clip of what Matt said there.
that's your buy opportunity, right? Where you can just outsource it to someone else. Depending on the vendor that you choose, you lose some control. You may lose first party data of that customer. You may lose the ability to speak to that customer, which is a big issue for most brands, right? Because that's what you're investing in.
Sure.
The second option is building it, which is now kind of going into the layer of localization of like, let's have an office there. Let's, set up a brick and mortar, whatever it might be, set up a warehouse or a fulfillment center.
People don't set up like a PO box.
Yeah, it's you can't really do that, right? From payment legislation, Visa, they don't let you do PO boxes. PayPal won't allow you to accept locally with a PO box, and many other local wallets. Like if you were a US brand wanting to go into Germany, for example, and you want to have Klarna on your checkout, you can't have a PO box.
Yeah.
And, kind of a shell entity in Germany. You'd have to fully go local. So some brands will take that in their shotgun approach internationally and say like, okay, well, we know we can't conquer, Southeast Asia really well, but we're going to go through this particular marketplace, or China.
Yeah.
And so they'll use the marketplace, but I think it's really the authenticity and building that voice.
Yeah.
The primary reason.
So let's assume you find a market that you're interested in being involved in because the marketplace is going to feature you and you can do it at the margins you want. You always see, and I think the marketplaces themselves, I remember eBay having this trouble, who do you work with? Is it smarter to work with a local firm in the country, or is it smarter to work with somebody down the street from you that you can get a hold of? Yeah, so this is interesting because the clip talks a lot about what's the right strategy for international expansion. Is it go everywhere all at once, or to be more strategic? First of all, the shotgun approach, it's got to be the worst name for anything. Nobody wants to be associated with a shotgun.
Not anymore.
No, not anymore. So meanwhile, anyway,
to the car.
What does it mean? Typically, most sellers are selling like into their home country and maybe a couple of neighboring countries. The shotgun approach, as it's talked about here, essentially means like rest of world, and using potentially one provider to get you in front of the rest of the world. Well, that has pluses and minuses in that it's not necessarily possible to localize to 212, or 200 plus countries in the world for payments, for cultural differences, for shipping carriers.
Yep.
And essentially it means that if you're doing kind of a peanut butter spread approach, which might be a better term than shotgun, that for the rest of the world, then you're actually under-investing in what the top markets was. So if you're an English-speaking country or a company and a brand, and that tends to be your biggest market if you were a US seller, selling into the UK, into Western Europe, into Australia, into Hong Kong. These are going to be your biggest markets. But if you're not necessarily focusing on what are the biggest marketing and segmentation opportunities in these markets, then you could actually do yourself a disservice. And so definitely, I think being strategic about which markets you enter is going to be something that we are recommending for sure here on the program.
Yeah, absolutely. And we didn't show this, but Matt talked a lot about brands that went to China because that was one of the biggest opportunities a couple of years ago. I was working for a brand, and that was one of our strategies. And we actually went through Channel Advisor, which is now Rithium, and we ended up partnering with Channel Advisor to go to JD.com, and you thought it was going to be so easy. It's always so easy.
It's a piece of cake.
Piece of cake. You
just in the sales presentation anyway.
Yeah, you send a feed, you get orders, you ship them to this holding facility that then they get them to China. It's all good, guys. But it was so difficult, and trying to manage your listings, and they're in a language that no one understood. And so, yes, Matt talked about you were on these late night calls. I was on very late night calls with people in China and reps in JD trying to work through it. you for sure have to make sure it's the right market, it's the right strategy, because it is not always like follow where the money is or where the hype is.
No, so lab-grown diamonds in China, no go, huh?
No, it was that Chinese moissanite was that they wanted that better. Get it cheaper. So yeah. Good throwback, Rick. Yeah. So, but marketplaces, it's a good segue because, marketplaces are another avenue where companies can explore cross-border strategies, and they might be an easier way in. And that was one of the things that we talked to Matt about is, hey, how do you think about that? What are recommendations? What have you seen brands do well or retailers do well? So let's roll that clip and talk to Matt about that a little bit.
China was the other huge one. With,
yes,
5 or so years ago, pre-COVID, when China was kind of the big emerging market. But their business is their direct-to-consumer sales is so nuanced, and so you have to make a huge investment as whether you're a luxury retailer or whatever. You really need to understand that market and have someone in market to help guide you. And we saw some of the biggest brands in the world just flop, millions of dollars burned.
Wow.
And just absolute flops. A lot of the big luxury brands did, because obviously luxury, there's a huge market for it.
Yeah.
But the knockoffs, right?
Or used to be.
Hard.
Yeah, there used to be. Yeah. And a lot of them just said, you know what, it's not worth the trouble. We're not seeing a return here. It's too nuanced of a market for us. And a lot of US brands building entities in either the UK or somewhere in Europe. I've seen a lot of businesses do this recently as a way to try and combat Brexit, get some sort of foothold in the European economic area. And they have these big grand plans. And then all of a sudden they're like, this is not really worth our spend and the effort that it takes to be local in this market. I've seen some that have executed well, but I'd say 70% pulled out. After building an entity, hiring people on the ground, maybe opening a warehouse, within a year or two, they realized that it was a bad decision and they pulled out.
Yeah.
And they just decided to facilitate cross-border. And again, it comes down to now you need to have the same inventory you offer to your US consumers needs to be available to your European consumers.
So it's not a slam dunk thing, basically what I'm taking away here. And there's also, I think, interesting, you and Matt talking about the difference in retailers versus brands. And when you're trying to drive high turnover, you've got inventory turn, you may not necessarily care as much about your brand presence, but if you're, Louis Vuitton, for sure you do. And going into these markets is you've got to have not only your brand strategy, but how you manage all the other aspects of that logistically.
Yeah, I think the difference isn't going quote unquote direct, setting up your own website or having your own like local presence there versus being on a marketplace where you're next to all these other brands. I mean, look, these international websites, if you've been on Tmall Global, you can make a very well represented brand site, but that takes money. That takes a partner that knows what they're doing. Like you can make it every bit almost as sophisticated as your regular website. And you can have people transacting for you on WeChat and like all the places that you need to be, but you can't do that without local boots on the ground. And I think that's one of the things that I took out of Matt's conversation is like, you can't do this from your local country and expect it's going to work out very well.
Right. Well, you remember also Mercado Libre was trying to pull from a lot of US brands and sellers. And it was kind of the same situation. It's like, you cannot just throw your inventory over the fence, cross your fingers with a hope and a prayer and think that that's going to ultimately yield success. So you do have to have people that you trust. And, you talked about this. It's like not probably the guy that's 2 doors down from you. Like, oh no, I've been there a couple of times, but it needs to be somebody that's well embedded in that region and fully understands and has done this before.
Yeah, because the service is not just after the sale and are they going to get the product, but the service is before the sale with consumers who are asking questions. And so you not only do you need people who are familiar with the platforms and how to access them, but you also need people in country that can localize and answer questions, and depending on the culture and the language and the customs of wherever you're selling into.
Yeah. Well, there was more that we talked through, especially when we went through like brand and retailer differences. Anything you want to tee up, Rick, for us as we head into this next
Yeah,
portion?
I mean, I think the big thing is this sort of turnover question, and really taking your time to do it properly. So we have a one last kind of main clip from our conversation with Matt that I think we wanted to highlight for everyone. That why not just go with a marketplace, and what are some of the advantages of going with a marketplace? And not to say that you don't need a local partner, but it seems like a lot of those cross-border issues are, if not taken care of, at least there is a sort of a set program that they have you to follow.
Yeah, I think a lot of it depends, right? If you're a retailer and you're just all about high volume, then a marketplace is probably a good fit for you. And if your price point and high volume, I think where brands get a little held up, and a retailer is a reseller of brands, and a brand is the owner
Yeah,
of the brand, right? So think Nordstrom's to Levi,
Yeah,
Levi's the brand,
yeah,
Nordstrom's is the
yeah,
retailer, right?
yeah.
So if you're a retailer and you just want high turnover, right? That's what makes money
Sure.
for you, and you don't care as much about your brand. And some retailers care about branding, right? But they ultimately care about high turnover. So they can go into a marketplace as long as it's not competitive, and try to, flood the products that they have the ability to resell into that marketplace. And it's way easier in most instances to go, especially in APAC, where consumer behavior is very different from US and Europe. So it's much easier to get in through that channel for sure. And once you start seeing that growth, that's when you make a conscious decision of, do we go direct to consumer versus channels. Brands, on the other hand, most of the owners that I talk to and have over the years, when we talk about localization and globalization, sometimes they'll be willing to sell on there. But I think the reason why they don't like marketplaces is because they kind of lose the authenticity. They become a commodity versus a
Right.
unique brand. And, if we're talking about like a $4,000 dress, that's obviously one thing. Like anything that's designer is going to have a very different effect in a marketplace instance. But even for maybe a brand that just really wants to connect to its consumers, but it sells t-shirts, they might not want to go into a marketplace, even though a t-shirt is arguably a commodity, but that brand wants to speak to their shopper directly and make sure that their supply chain is wholly owned by the brand.
Yeah, I mean, it seems like, it's so funny. There's been this debate in the United States and other places about the value of the marketplace, particularly if you're a brand. You saw it at eBay and Fashion Vault.
Oh, yeah.
Fashion Vault, pour out some liquor for the old Fashion Vault. But trying to convince a brand that they get value from a marketplace is easier said than done.
It is so rough because we talked about like the brand control, the experience, who owns the customer, and that really is challenging for even brands and retailers because they want to be able to reap the benefits of that new customer that's shopping with them. There's also being alongside of just any kind of Joe Smo also selling that type of inventory, depending on where it's getting sourced from. That was like our biggest challenge and roadblock at eBay, even though for some brands, we were their best shot at going global because at that time we had partnered with Pitney for the shipping program, and it was wildly successful because it was very early days and brands were still figuring things out. And so you could, through eBay, get more access to all the different countries and start selling internationally. And so but even with that, for sure, it was a big struggle. And a lot of the inventory that you were getting would be their off price, their outlet. It was not going to be for sure in season or even, their sale clearance.
Yeah, for sure.
Moving through that.
Yeah, I mean, it seems to me that, like, if I'm reading between the lines, Matt definitely falls on the brand side of the equation. I would say my only counterpoint to that would be, if a tree falls in the woods, does anyone hear it? If consumers are shopping on the marketplaces, particularly if it's an international or it's South America or it's Southeast Asia, these marketplaces are super popular. And
Yep.
so if you want to find new customers, and especially if it's someone that a brand doesn't know about, marketplace is a great way to do it. If everyone knows who you are, it's a different question. And
It
so
is.
if I find that if you need to be able to drive your own demand, then I think marketplace should be a little bit higher priority for you versus not.
Yeah, and look, in fashion, I think that is a place that Zalando had started to carve out a niche of being attractive to more fashion forward brands. Even they have Nike, they have Adidas, they had really strong relationships at a direct level with those retailers and brands. And I don't know, they're like many others, still trying to kind of continue to find their footing. But I felt like Zalando was a real contender to challenge Amazon in a meaningful way. For sure, I think that you've got to consider marketplaces if you haven't, because it is one of the simpler ways, at least, to reach a global audience.
No, I think that's definitely the case. This has been a great discussion. I mean, I think diving deep into some of the challenges and perils in cross-border, it's something that I've kind of love. We have another, I think, last word clip from our conversation with Matt.
Yep, we do. He's going to help us close out this discussion. It's been great.
If you're a CEO, you're quarter to quarter, you're just trying to survive and make sure you get your bonus. But for a privately owned and owner operated brand, which I would say is most brands today, they have to look at this as a true investment, and you have to step out of your comfort zone. Like, yes, it is risky. Yes, it sucks having to take calls at 10 p.m. at night or whatever with your new supplier that's overseas, or marketplace or whatever it might be, right? Just whatever your vendor is. It is risky. It's hard. Some people are not okay with some of the cultural differences in business, or there's friction there. But if you really want to do well in that market, that's absolutely what you have to do. And if you look at a long-term approach, you need to know that you might be implying a short-term strategy by using a local marketplace in, a place like APAC, where the consumer experience and, customer behaviors and purchase behavior, it's all very nuanced compared to the Western world.
Well, Matt was fantastic. So great to have him here. Really great advice. And he didn't want to miss out on the dance party. So we're going to let him close it out with us, right?
Yeah, I'm excited to see it. We had some great dance moves. So have a good weekend, everybody.
Have a great weekend. Thank you so much, Miracle. It's been amazing. Hope you've enjoyed the show, and we will see you next week. Have a great weekend, everybody. Thank you so much, Matt, for being here. Rick, hope you're having a blast in Cleveland.
We're enjoying it. Thanks a lot.
Thanks, guys. Thank you for having me. Appreciate it. Woo!
Is this your tariff dance, Matt?
Oh yeah. The Trump dance.
Weekend looks so good on you. Yeah, the weekend looks so good on you. The weekend looks so good on you.